we cover everything today, then there is an option to capture that for us to respond to questions at a later date. Holly, would you be able to put the agenda up, please? Brilliant, thank you very much. We are going to be starting with an introduction to the scheme. We're very pleased to welcome Steve Meader from the FLF team, who's going to talk you through the details of the scheme. We're then delighted to hand over to two of the panelists from previous schemes, Professor Georgina Enfield and Joanna Norman from the VNA. We're also delighted to have some award holders to speak with you about their experiences, so Dr. Ruth Nugent and Dr. Joseph Lindley. There'll be a Q&A session which will be chaired by my colleague Jess Collier. We'll have a break around 2:20, and then go into the afternoon session, which is more around how you might prepare for an FLF interview, and also what is meant by added value and how you sort of tell the story of your own development. So how do you this is really about how do you tailor your application for the scheme. There'll be another Q&A opportunity, and then Jess will also talk a little bit about AHRC's own early career funding opportunities for people who might be interested in those schemes. So with that, I shall close and hand over to Jess to really lead you through the afternoon. We hope this event is beneficial to you. It is, as I say, a big opportunity, but also please use the opportunity today to learn what you can about the scheme, to ask any questions. But my colleagues Jess and Holly and Catherine are also very much on hand if you have questions following the event. We're very keen to hear from the community, so please don't be shy about contacting us afterwards if you do have further questions. So with that, I'll hand over to Jess.
Thank you, Sue. Welcome everyone. I'm blown away by the amount of people that have registered to attend this event and very, very excited. I hope you find today extremely useful. So without further ado, just to kick off, I believe my colleague Steve from the FLF Central team is going to introduce you to the scheme. Steve, are you ready?
Thanks, Jess. Oh, just trying to share my window, and where are we? Oh, it never goes smoothly, does it? Just give me 1 second. There we go. Hi there. So my name's Steve Meader. I'm the program lead for business and performance within the Future Leader Fellowships team, and I'm just going to give you a bit of a whistle-stop tour today of what the scheme involves, and a little overview of what the application process is like and what we're looking for in Future Leader Fellowships. So the idea of the Future Leader Fellowships scheme is to help us grow the strong supply of talented individuals needed to ensure that UK research and innovation continues to be world-class. And what we're doing is we're doing this by focusing these fellowships at one of the known pinch points in the sort of research and innovation career stages. So really that early career researcher point where people are starting to transition to independence and start up their own sort of own areas of research. So the scheme is unique to UKRI in that it provides seamless support across the entire UKRI remit, and that's not just across the different research councils, but going into the space of Innovate UK as well. We allow applications from business, from academia, independent research organisations, and we're really focused on making sure that people can apply across the whole breadth of that. And including particularly where people cross the boundaries of what would be considered normal research council remits. We have funding for the scheme at the moment for 3 years, for 6 rounds, supporting roughly 200 individuals every year. And these are for awards that could potentially be up to 7 years, funded on a 4-year model initially, with a potential renewal phase for an additional 3 years if people would like that. One of the questions we'll inevitably get is, will there be a round 7 after this? We feel the scheme has positioned itself very well. It was highlighted recently in the government's research and development roadmap. So we're very hopeful that the scheme will continue beyond this point, but until the outcome of the comprehensive spending review is announced, we won't know for certain whether or not this is actually going to go ahead or not, but we're hopeful. And just say that these are ring-fence funds for the from the National Productivity Investment Fund. So this particular fellowship scheme hasn't encroached on any of the funding that was available to other fellowship schemes that were available previously. So, what's the purpose of these? As I've said, the main aim of the FLF scheme is to support early career researchers and innovators across the whole of the UKRI remit. There are a number of areas that we'd like to facilitate and encourage, but I should say that none of these are mandatory, and these are not, all of these don't need to be ticked by all of the individual applicants. This is aims and objectives for the scheme as a whole. As I mentioned earlier, this is for interdisciplinary research and innovation. So really looking at work that crosses the boundaries of the sort of traditional research councils. Looking at international mobility, so that's, you know, bringing new and retaining researchers within the UK from overseas, but also encouraging people from within the UK to take part in sort of global research and building international links. We support part-time and flexible working. So I think approximately 5% of our current fellows work part-time, and then they're allowed to extend that pro rata to increase the length of the grant. So if you're working at 50% time, you know, you'd initially apply for an 8-year grant rather than a 4-year grant. Again, looking at cross-sector working, research and innovation with and in business. So this is one of the first fellowship scheme within UKRI that allows us to actually fund applicants who are based within businesses. But we're not just looking at within business as well. We're very strongly encourage applicants that are based in academia and that are working with business. One of the things we emphasize in this scheme is host support, and we'll come on to that later, and also trying to increase diversity in a number of ways for the applicants that are coming in. So what are the awards? So it's what we give is a monetary award to conduct a specific program of research or innovation to significantly enhance an individual's early career. What's special about this fellowship is that we give, you know, essentially we buy out 100% of the candidate's working time so that they can really focus on their research and innovation at the early start of their career. And it sort of protects them from doing other activities, and, you know, they get a small amount of their time that they can dedicate to other activities, whether that's teaching or, you know, clinical research for clinical academics. But it also allows them to, you know, really focus on, you know, developing themselves and developing themselves as leaders. It's an award for somebody who has already gained a doctorate or has equivalent experience, because we know perhaps in business, you know, a doctorate is not necessarily the career stage you're going to go through. But the key thing is that, you know, you have the potential to be an outstanding leader in your field. One of the questions we get a lot is, what is early career? And it's not something that it's particularly easy for us to define in a sort of tick box way. Really what we do is we set out for you to set in your application why this award is going to make a difference to your career, how it's going to make a step change for you in moving towards independence. You know, if it's been judged that you know, have already received independence and you've already maybe had large grants before, then you're probably not going to be particularly competitive in this scheme. It's really about those people that are trying to set themselves and make that next step up. But we have guidance on the website, but it's really for you to justify the impact that the award is going to have on your career. So I'm just going to go over some of the key messages and the feedback that we've had from the latest rounds of the FLF scheme to give you a little bit of guidance and sort of let you know where things stand. So we've had 4 rounds to date. 41 FLFs awarded in round 1, 78 in round 2, 88 in round 3, and 100 in round 4. Or around about 100 in round 4. It's currently embargoed, but we're hoping to be able to announce the details of round 4 in mid-October. And you can see the details of the Future Leader Fellowships that we've awarded so far on our website. The success rate at the moment, or for the last couple of rounds, has been about 25%, or at least it was 25%, 26 nearish for round 4. As I say, it's not just around the project, and strong applicants really do fully consider leadership and career development and the difference that the award is going to make to them, you know, and how they see them progressing and where they see themselves at the end of the award, and that's really is what makes a strong applicant. As I said before, candidates who are further towards being established and independent have become less competitive as the scheme has progressed. And that's really because, you know, we're looking for value for money and what the difference this award is going to make to a person's career. So if you're already established, you'll be less competitive. And I say applicants should articulate the clear added value of the fellowship mechanism of support. Other messages that came back from round 4, you know, this is feedback from one of the interview questions that we had. There were questions around equality, diversity, and inclusion in the recent round, and research culture. I think generally the panels felt that perhaps these questions weren't particularly well answered by applicants on a whole. And despite the strong messaging that's been put out by universities in and HIs in these particular areas, it seemed perhaps that they hadn't been fully grasped by the applicants. So that's just general feedback that came back. We had a lower than anticipated diversity of candidates at the point of application. So we're working with hosts to encourage that, you know, ensure that all potential applicants have a fair chance and are encouraged and supported through transparent selection processes based on ability and potential, and that it's the best people that are being put forward. The other thing, and that's particularly relevant to today, is that we're looking to encourage and increase the number of applications that we receive from the arts and humanities and the social sciences communities. The majority of the applications that we receive to the scheme are in the sort of STEM fields, with a particular emphasis on EPSLC. But, you know, we see no difference in the award rate based on the number of applications that come in. So an application that comes in with an arts and humanities background has just as much chance of being successful in the FLF scheme as does someone from any of the other sectors. We also get questions around the size of the awards. The FLF is only looking to fund very large awards and ambitious awards, and we realise that, you know, the amount of funding that's needed for different for different areas is, you know, essentially they're looking for value for money. So, you know, cost things as they need to be costed, and we fund everything from smaller 300k awards, where it's essentially just paying the person's salary for the duration of the project, you know, up to larger 1.5 million awards. Updates to round 6. So a business one of the changes is that previously we had business-based applicants submitting their outline proposals through SurveyMonkey. Now business-based applicants will be asked to submit through JES in the same way as everyone else. This essentially just moves, it's slightly more difficult to businesses to apply through JES, but it just moves this point further forward in the process. We're encouraging applicants to suggest applicant-nominated reviewers. Peer review for this scheme is a phenomenal task for us, and if we can get just a few ideas on where to start with peer reviewers on each application, it really does help. And we noticed that in the last round, a lot of applicants didn't put any names in. I mean, peer review is a phenomenal and difficult task for the research councils anyway, but the sheer volume for this scheme, any help we can get is truly appreciated. For round 4, we did all of our interview panels online, and we're going to likely remain with this for round 5 and 6. The next 2 points are really sort of more focused towards the HEIs, the hosts of applicants, but we're not looking to increase the number of applications for round 6. We had a fairly large increase for round 5. And the success rate is likely to be around 15% for this round. So we're asking that, you know, don't increase the numbers of applications, increase the diversity, put the best candidates forward. So we ask host organisations to really carefully consider the potential competitiveness of the applications that you're putting forward. One of the things we get questions a lot about at the moment is the potential impact of COVID-19, both for people that are putting an award together and people that already have an award. If you're considering putting an application in, you really need to base that application on the information that's available at the point of submission, and if applicable, known impacts should be accounted for, but you don't need to include a whole range of different contingency plans for the potential impacts of COVID-19 and the different scenarios that might play out over the next year or 2 years or so. Reviewers will be briefed on this, so as I say, just base the application on the information known at the time. You can still include requests for travel, and any changes in circumstances that affect the proposal will then be managed post-award. Post-award, we can be very flexible with the start dates up to the mandatory start date indicated on the website. We allow no-cost extensions, and we've been working extensively with hosts and with active fellows to better understand the impacts of COVID-19 on this scheme. So we mentioned earlier the future round. So round 5 is currently in progress. We'll have SIF panels and interview panels early next year. Round 6 is the one that we'd be interested in. So the outline proposal deadline for that is the 10th of December. If you're looking to submit a full proposal, you do have to submit an outline beforehand. And then the full proposal deadline will be the 19th of January 2021, with interviews to take place in September 2021. What we're also doing as well is we're looking at as I said before, we work on a 4+3 funding model, and we're currently in discussion with members of the community on exactly what that renewal process is going to look like. At the moment, we're going to have, it looks like there's going to be a light touch process for the assessment of awarding the 3-year continuation for current fellows, but we'll be communicating this shortly to existing fellows, and we'll be inviting feedback. So just briefly, I'm going to go over the application process. So really the things you need to look for is this the best outlet for you? There are other fellowship schemes available, but is the applicant one of outstanding potential? Is it going to offer a step change in the career of the applicant? Is the host organisation willing to provide significant support in terms of opportunities and training? And is the proposed programme addressing a multifaceted, significant and difficult research or innovation problem? These are the scheme criteria that are assessed throughout the process. So we're looking for research and innovation excellence. We're looking at the applicants and their track record and what their development is going to look like. And we understand that this is very different for very different sectors and very different areas of research. The impact and the strategic relevance of the research, and the research and innovation environment, and the cost of the proposal. One of the things I've mentioned a few times is, the input from host organisations and the commitment to the scheme. This comes in a couple of ways. The first of these is the commitment to the cost of the fellowship. So for the start of the fellowship, the FLF and UKRI pay for the 100% of the salary, but this tapers over the course of the fellowship. And there's an academic commitment from the HEI from year 3. It's slightly different for business hosted fellows, where we follow the EU state aid rules, and if anybody has any specific questions around that, but that's a sort of level cost over the course of the fellowship based on the EU state aid guidelines. There's also a required commitment from the academic host organisation for a pathway to an open-ended research or innovation focused position at the end of the award. It can be that you're in an open-ended position already when you apply, but it recognises that research employers differ in their employment policies and practices, and this may look slightly different, but there's an expectation that the fellow will be in the best position to take up an open-ended position prior to completion of the fellowship. And you can find more information on our website about the documents that you'd need to provide when applying, and the sort of overview and guidance for the scheme. Quickly on the application process, as I said, there are 5 stages to the application process: outline proposal, full proposal, and then the various peer review and SIF panels. And we'll just go over those in a little bit of detail now. So this is essentially the decision-making process. So there's a 4-stage review process for the FLF scheme. The first stage, you submit your application, and this gets sent out to external peer review. You get written peer review by sector and discipline experts. You'll then get those peer review comments, typically 3 per application, sent back to you, and you get the opportunity to respond to those again in a written format. What you need to remember at this point is that when you're responding, you're not responding directly to the peer reviewers. The peer reviewers won't see your response. You'll be responding to the panel members. So all of the information from the peer reviewers and your response then go to a shortlisting panel, and the panel members will consider both of these things in deciding who goes forward to interview. For those that are successful and go forward to interview, you know, it's a roughly half-hour to 40-minute interview that I say will be held by via Zoom to decide which applicants will be awarded a Future Leaders Fellowship. Important things on the SIFT panel is when they're considering the peer review, they are a moderating panel. So the SIFT panel are slightly more generalist than the peer reviewers that will be reviewing your application. They're not allowed to introduce any new information. They're just allowed to assess the peer reviewer comments and the response from the applicants. They say memberships from the panels come from a wide range of different disciplines and sectors. And then at the interview, you'll be asked questions across the whole of the published assessment criteria. So I've gone into this in a little bit of detail already. As I say, we expect to read 3 or more for each of the each one, depending on the breadth of research within each grant put forward. The experts are chosen by UKRI, so we work very closely with all of the individual research councils at Innovate UK to ensure that the most appropriate reviewers are added to each of the applications. In terms of your response to the peer reviewers, you know, just some simple tips and guidance here. Be positive and keep your cool. You might disagree with the things that are said, but, you know, be level-headed, just answer the questions that are asked and give the best response that you can. Appeal to your audience. You know, bear in mind that it's not going to be the people that reviewed your application that will be seeing your response. That will be the panel who will be seeing both sets of information. Provide evidence for any of your claims where you can. Be clear and concise, and keep to the guidelines where possible. I've gone over this a little bit already on the SIFT panels, but just to sort of reassure you on exactly how this works. So the SIFT panels, we have a lot of applications, so it can't all be done at one panel. We have several concurrent panels running at any one time. They're made up of a variety of experts from across the research and innovation system, and consider all 4 of the assessment criteria that I've mentioned before. As I said, this is a moderating panel. The proposals are all discussed and ranked and banded. We have roving panel members that move across the different panels to ensure that there's consistency between panels. And then we have a tensioning meeting at the end to produce final banded lists. And then, you know, successful applicants are invited to interview, but no further feedback is provided at this stage. Again, at the interview panel, this will be a smaller panel, and again, it's many concurrent panels. They'll be made up of a variety of experts across the research and innovation system. All candidates successful at the SIFT will be interviewed and discussed against the published criteria, and you can find example interview questions online. Please note these are not the specific questions that you'll be asked. They're just examples of the types of questions that you could be asked. But topic areas include, you know, you likely give a brief presentation on your program of work, and will be asked questions around that. But then you'll get additional questions around leadership focus, you know, how you see yourself as a leader, how you see you're going to develop yourself, and your career development, to how the fellowship will benefit you. All of the applicants are scored, the proposals are ranked and banded, and again, we have roving panel members that move across the different panels to ensure consistency between the panels. And then we have a tensioning meeting across the panels to produce final banded lists, and we do see how many of the applicants we were able to fund, and all applicants are provided feedback at this point. So I'm going to stop there, and I'll hand back to Jess, who will move you on to the next speaker.
Thank you so much, Steve, for that overview of the FLF scheme, and for the sharing the messages from round 4 and the impacts of COVID-19. I think prospective applicants will find that extremely useful. I am now delighted to welcome Georgina Enfield from Liverpool University and Joanna Norman from the V&A Museum. They are both FLF core panellists, And by that, I mean that they've been involved in the SIF panels and interview panels from previous FLF rounds. And they're going to share with you their perspective of what a competitive FLF application looks like. I believe Georgina's going to kick things off, if that's okay.
I am. I hope everybody can hear me. I'm just going to share my screen, hopefully. Let's see if this works. Okay, can everybody see that? Great, excellent. And everybody can hear me all right. All right, off we go. So just a first note of thanks to our AHRC colleagues and our UKRI colleagues for enabling us to join you today, but also more broadly for all the work that goes on to support this scheme. I think I speak for Joanna and others who are in the room today to say that it really is a privilege to be working in any capacity on this scheme, but in our involvement as SIF panelists and interview panelists, it's been an absolute privilege to see some fantastic and really exciting proposals and programmes of work being forwarded through this scheme. So we continue to hope for more coming through. So what I want to do over the next 10 minutes or so, and just before Joanna comes in, is to talk through a little bit around my own reflections as to what makes a good application. And the way in which Joanna and I are doing this is that we've split our presentations into two key components. So I'm going to take research and innovation and environment and costs, and then Joanna will focus on applicant development and impact and strategic relevance. And then later in the afternoon, we'll talk around the interview and added value. And it's going to be a bit of a canter through, so bear with us. But Steve has just taken you through the key components, really, the key considerations of what a good application looks like from the perspective of research and innovation. And it's all these kinds of thematic areas here: the strength, the idea, the importance and the novelty, the vision, the alignment with UKRI strategic priorities where possible, innovation, and that's something I'm going to come back to in a minute, impact, the nature of the distinctive and outstanding nature of the research, appropriate methods, feasibility, and impact. Now we'll pick up on various aspects of these key considerations, and as I say, these are all documented in the FLF call. But I think reflecting on some of my own experiences, those of other panelists, one of the key areas that I think AHRC type candidates really need to consider is ambition and scale. These are very different types of fellowships. They're not the normal project-based fellowships. They are programs of work over projects. And so we're very much encouraging a long view and an ambitious and bold view on this. So that's not necessarily in terms of big, expensive projects, as Steve was saying. It's more about the big questions and the big concepts, the big ideas. So I think it's fair to say that for FLFs, we're looking for ambition and scale in terms of your ideas. And this takes a little bit of a different mindset, and we've got to think bigger as arts and humanities colleagues around this. Now I've got a picture of coffee bags here, and you're probably thinking, why on earth has she got a picture of coffee bags here? But I think this speaks to an idea, and this is the sort of fourth bullet point on my slide here, is it's an idea that it's something that's so obvious and yet hasn't been done before. Whether you like coffee bags or not, I know plenty of people who don't, it's an idea that you think, well, how come we got tea bags but not coffee bags? It's an idea that's like, of course. And I think when we've been sitting in SIF panels and interview panels, when an idea is conveyed, both in the written application and in the presentation and interview, which we'll come back to this afternoon, if it becomes an of course moment, you think, it's a great idea, it's a good idea here, it's a visionary idea. And I think it's bold, it's risky, and it's adventurous, and that's what we want to see with the FLFs. It's also about leadership and legacy, and how your idea is going to enable you as an individual to become the leader of that field or crossover fields and interdisciplinary fields, and what legacy you're going to leave to others who will follow you in this area, and the team that you develop. So I think that's one of the key points from my perspective. It's about the ambition and the scale of the FLF. And I think as arts and humanities researchers, we shouldn't be put off from the idea of innovation either. And I think it's fair to say again that in talking to colleagues in various different academic contexts, some AHRC candidates might be put off by the idea of innovation, but we encourage you to think broadly about what innovation actually means. It's not invention. It's about thinking differently, thinking outside the box. It's about interdisciplinary working, synergies and novelty, new methods, new ways of working, new ways of developing knowledge. So it's that kind of novelty, that innovative novelty that we're looking for in FLFs. And that's about thinking in a different kind of way. It's not about technology necessarily, though it could be. But I don't want AHRC candidates to be put off by a concept of innovation that is based on a very sort of traditional understanding. It's a new idea, creative thought.
Sorry, Georgina.
Yeah?
Sorry. It's showing up as your presenter view. Do you mind if I can either show slides for you,
sorry,
or if you exit full screen and then on the presentation at the top you can just untick the box, just make it a bit bigger for everyone. If you exit the presentation,
here we go,
and then on the top toolbar you should be able to go to, yes, if you go to slideshow right at the top, like just along from home, if you go to slideshow.
I've got it. Sorry, I thought I was
and then no, that's okay. And then if you go along right to the final one, there's a box that says use presenter view. You can just untick that.
Use presenter view.
Can you see the tick box on the slideshow tab at the top?
Hang on. Apologies.
Sorry.
Apologies. There we go.
Underneath where it says automatic.
No, I'm sorry. Hang on. Let me just go.
No, that's okay. Okay, yeah. So go across to your right with your mouse. Keep going. And then, yeah, right there. You untick that, and then you can go into your presentation. And there we go. That's perfect. Is that
I do
okay?
apologise, everybody.
No, that's okay. Thank you.
I've only done 6 months of Zooms. So innovation, we've done innovation, I think. So it's about thinking in a different kind of way. So the other area, I think, that is of interest from what Steve was just saying, but also what's set out in the overall documents for the FLF scheme is about interdisciplinarity. Now, as Steve was saying, this isn't necessarily, a part of you don't have to put interdisciplinary working into your application, but we have seen quite a lot of applications where they talk about doing interdisciplinary work. And I think one key message from me as a panelist would be that if you're making the claim around interdisciplinary working, then it has to be genuine interdisciplinary working. And it's often easy to talk about doing work at the interdisciplinary interface, but actually it's harder to achieve. And it really comes down to how you define it. So there's interdisciplinary working, which is genuine working between disciplines, and the inter bit of that word is the key core of this point really that I'm trying to make. It's the way in which different disciplines come together. Other people might be talking about transdisciplinary work or cross-disciplinary work. Trans is where you've got different kinds of sectors coming together, and cross-disciplinary work is where you've got a sort of crossover and intersectionality. But interdisciplinary work, to do it properly, is where you bring different disciplines together and where you actually intermingle those disciplines to produce something new. So I think in terms of arts and humanities research applications, it's really important to be clear about that interdisciplinary working. Are you bringing new synergies which are going to bring novelty to the questions that you are asking? What synergies are appropriate, and how will you as an individual make them happen? Okay. The other area I think is really important to stress, and which will make a strong application, is where you've got partnerships and collaborative working with organisations. And I think it's really important to make sure that these partnerships and collaborations are embedded from the get-go, and they're not additional, oh, well, we're going to be working with this organisation to disseminate research. It's not about that, it's about co-designing. And I think the best applications we've seen have been those that involve co-production of a programme of research. So your partner organisations, whatever they are embedded in the research design from the start, and you can tell when that is the case. I also think to encourage you to think about how partnerships and collaborations will be supported throughout the duration of the FLF and potentially beyond as well. How will the partnerships work for you and the broader team that you create, and how will they be supported beyond the life of the FLF, and what's the overall goal of those partnerships? Is it going to benefit the institution in which you're working, as well as the nature and the programme of work and the legacy that you leave? Now, Joanna will talk a little bit more about co-applicants as well as the applicant and the importance of what to put into the applications with respect to that. But I think it's really important from the perspective of collaboration to make sure that your co-applicants make sense in terms of their roles and how you build that into the application. So overall, just before we get on to environment and costs, I think in terms of the research and innovation, what makes a good application are all of these issues, these things: the compelling, impactful, coherent research program, ambitious and adventurous. And I've got a quote here from what I think we've used repeatedly actually in the panels. It's like, this is an application that's risky in a good way. And so if you can think of your research in that kind of way, I think that will help in terms of being adventurous. Robust, tested, if possible, well-argued and clear visionary ideas. Are you changing the field through a long-term and sustained engagement? If you are, then this is an FLF application. Is the fellowship developing you as an individual, helping you to develop a team and connecting with others, including co-Is, but also, which you can include in FLFs, but also collaborators and non-HEIs and businesses? Don't think that ethics and risk assessment is just another add-on. It's integral to a good case. Be clear, be able to express your vision clearly, and Joanna will talk a little bit around this, but we do ask people often in the interviews to be able to give us a snapshot, a sort of elevator pitch of what the project's about, the program's about. And then this point, you need to be able to demonstrate that the place where you're going to be working in your FLF, your host organisation, is the right organisation for you. And this involves thinking around goodness of fit, thinking around the contributions that they will make to your FLF, but what you will also make to that institution, and the nature of the support that is available and whether this is appropriate. So very briefly, the host institution needs to be able to provide the right kind of context and environment to support you in the delivery of the FLF and to support you as a research leader and going forward. So think about who's there, think about the capacity, the facilities, the collections, the networks, the partnerships that are in place. What could be in place? Is there a clear commitment from that institution in terms of funding support and a pathway to a secure position afterwards? What kind of career development opportunities can be provided? What kind of training is on offer? What could you suggest could be on offer? And think about bespoke training. What would be benefit to you depending on the nature of the work that you're proposing? And think through different kinds of sectors in this context. Think about the mentors that might be available in the institution who may be able to support you. And in terms of mentoring, don't just think about who's in the institution, but think beyond. So you could be hosted by an institution, but have mentors in other places. You might want a steering committee or an advisory board, and you might also want to embed this into the applications. We've seen some very good applications where they've got expertise in the advisory boards who are helping to shape and support the programme of work as it goes forward. And the host institution should be enabling you to monitor progress and ongoing review of your programme of work, as could your steering committees and advisory boards. And it may be also that there's colleagues in the host institution that are part of the UKRI's mentoring network for FLFs, and that's something else to look at because they will be people that you can call on as well. And then I think it's also important to bear in mind the nature of the specific support offered by the institution. So if you are approaching an institution to host your FLF, give them plenty of time. The process of support takes a while. And I would say that there's some very, very good examples of best practice, and I'm biased, I think Liverpool does this very well, but there's a very good peer review support and sort of wraparound support for FLF applicants that involves interviews, mock interviews, helping with the PI responses and so on. And I think the best kind of institutional support is that kind of support that enables the FLF applicant to feel supported whether or not the application is successful. So I'm going to hand over now to Joanna. I don't know if Jess, you want to introduce Joanna?
Yes, Joanna, if you're around. So Joanna Norman from the V&A Museum is another fantastic FLF core panelist that I ask way too much from. If she's around, can't see her.
Yes, yeah, I'm here. Yeah, thank you. Do you want, Georgina, do you want to, I can either share mine or you can move the slides, which would be better.
Should I move the slides for you? Because given that I've had technical issues, it's probably safer, isn't it?
Brilliant, thank you. Hi, everybody. So, yeah, it's brilliant to be part of this. I would echo much of what Georgina said about what a pleasure it is, and a really stimulating one to be part of the panel for this scheme and to see some fantastic research proposals coming through. I'm director of the V&A Research Institute, so I come from a museum environment, but one that has a very long track record of engaging in research and postgraduate teaching. So it's a slightly different context that I'm coming from than a university background, but with many similarities. And so far I've done, I think, 1 SIF panel and 2 interview panels. So it's, and it's, as I say, it's been absolutely fascinating. So I'm going to talk briefly just about impact and strategic relevance to start with, and then to move on to applicant and their development. Georgina, would you mind? Brilliant, thank you. So, and quite a bit of what I'll speak about touches on things that Georgina has already mentioned, because I think while all of these are different aspects of the FLF proposal and application process, I think in the best applications, they are, of course, all interconnected, and the links between impact and you as an applicant, the environment that will be supporting you, and the programme of work, all, of course, are completely interconnected and should be very tightly drawn together. So thinking about impact, this is obviously about the importance of your research, and it's about its potential for impact from the short term to the medium and longer term. And there are obviously many different kinds of impact and different levels, and you might find it helpful to think about it, for example, as concentric circles. So starting from you, this is obviously a fellowship programme. It's focused very much on you as an applicant, leading that broader programme of work that Georgina has talked about. It's your idea. You would be leading a team, and you would be using this fellowship to get to the next level of your career. So you're at the core of it. So it obviously has an impact on you, on those that you're working with, the team that you put together, any partners or collaborators, the institution that is serving to support you and help you take that research forward, and of course on the discipline. So this is as Georgina has explained, the research and innovation is the heart of the proposal. And so it's really about thinking how you are going to impact the discipline that you're working with, or if your proposal is interdisciplinary, on the disciplines that it brings together. Are you establishing a new field, as Georgina has mentioned? And if so, how are you going to develop, how will that field become established and developed through your research, but as Georgina mentioned, beyond that as well. And then thinking beyond academia and linked to that, thinking about the broader economic and societal context. What is the potential for your research proposal to have impact on key aspects of our life and of the economy? UKRI has identified a number of priority areas which you may find it useful to look at and to think about whether your research aligns with any of those or addresses them. And if so, how does it do that? So what are the potential impacts that you might bring to those? Or if it's not UKRI priority areas, but there are other very clear areas that your research has the potential to impact on, what are they? Who are those people? Or what areas of society do you have the potential to really have a significant benefit on? It might be health, it might be education, it might be economy, it might be industry. All these are different things. As with all of this, it's not you're not trying to fill all of these different things. There's no expectation that you're going to meet all of them, but think about what the kind of areas are that you might have the potential to impact on. Brilliant, thank you. And I just thought I would use 2 particular examples to explain that a bit further, and really to think about both what you want to achieve and how you're going to do it, and to think about the difference between just disseminating your research and actually ensuring that your research has the impact that you are hoping to achieve. So, for example, if you think that your project has the potential to affect public policy, then think as hard as you can and do as much homework as you can about the policy areas that you're seeking to contribute to. So why is it those areas? What specific policies are there that you have identified that you think need to be changed, or general policy areas where you think actually your research has the capability to completely change the landscape or to improve it? Think about it from the point of view of the policymakers themselves. So what is it about your research that will help them? What do they need? What's the kind of evidence that you might produce and that would help them to make changes? How would you encourage or empower them? And what are the kind of timescales for impact? Because some things, there might be short-term impacts, but many will be longer. And so really working out how you would measure those impacts and how you would ensure them beyond just sharing your research with policymakers is really, really key. And Georgina mentioned a really important point, which is about partnerships and building relationships and working those into the application from the beginning. And I think thinking about how those partnerships can help you to ensure impact or deliver impact is really, really critical to the success of achieving it. Then another kind of area of impact that that often comes up, and is obviously something that that I have a particular interest in, is that you might think that there are opportunities for your research to impact on other kinds of organisations. It might be schools, it might be community groups, it might be heritage and cultural organisations like museums. And again, I think the thing to think about there is how does your research fit with that organisation's priorities and activities? What is it that they are doing where your research has the potential to effect change and to effect changes that could then be lasting? And think quite specifically about why that particular organisation. You know, if you're thinking about museums, for example, don't just go to the biggest one or the one that seems most obvious. Think quite carefully about what it is that is particular about that specific organisation. It might be to do with the geographical context, it might be to do with its audiences, it might be to do with its collections, could be a combination of all of those things, but that makes that one one that would be really, really valuable and one where you have the potential to contribute to lasting change. And like policy, you know, why should that organisation be interested in it? What's in it for them? And try to think specifically about what you and your project can offer. Rather, it's obviously, it may be a completely new world to you. You may not have any experience of working with those kinds of organisations before. And there's no expectation that you know everything to start with. But the more that you can think in quite clear and concrete terms about what you can offer and what you're seeking to change and how you can work together, I think the more productive and the more convincing that will be. We move to the next. Thank you. So just some general thoughts, picking up on those about different areas of impact and how to achieve it. And this links into to the applicant and development. And again, it's about the how as much as the what. So what skills or training or other kinds of development might you need, and how are you going to reach the different audiences that you're seeking to reach? As I say, you may not have any experience of doing this before, and that's fine. But if you don't, how are you going to develop it? Or who do you need to be working with? Or what kinds of training might you need in order to develop and deliver those kinds of impact? And that goes back to what Georgina was just talking about in terms of research environment and moving on to the applicant. And as I've just said, you know, and Georgina as well, if you're planning to involve partners in your project, and that might be impact partners as much as co-applicants, talk to them well in advance of submitting your application, because and the reason for that is twofold. It's partly because if you approach them well in advance, then it gives them confidence and that they're really important to your project. So it gives you time to work with them to find the best approach to collaborating, and to come up with something that is really solid, is grounded in an understanding of each other and of what you can achieve by working together, which is, I would say, is pretty obvious when you read an application as a panelist as to whether that is really, you know, it's a really thought through collaboration. But the other thing is that it also gives you time to find other partners if they can't collaborate. And then the other thing associated with that is that your partners may come up with ideas and opportunities that you hadn't been aware of, or that you didn't even know existed. So you might have to do an initial kind of sell of your idea to them, but they may well be able to suggest things that, again, that are new opportunities and that really strengthen your application. And I think lastly on that, as I say, you may find that the first approach doesn't come off, but don't give up if that's the case. Listen to why they can't collaborate, which will often be to do with practical issues of, you know, capacity or whatever it happens to be. And if they can't join you, then maybe ask if they have, if they would suggest anyone else, or think about where there might be other partners who could do what you wanted to do there. So I think, you know, use it as a process of thinking about building relationships that hopefully are not just relationships that would be useful to this application, but if they're core to your proposal, will be relationships that you want to build anyway as part of your future research and development. So moving on to the next slide and to the section of the application that is about the applicant and development. So this is the focus that is on you, and it's on you in a number of different ways. So it's partly showing that you are you're on the way to becoming a leader in your field. You don't have to show that you are already there. That's not the point of this particular scheme. But the aim is to demonstrate through the application that you're on a kind of trajectory. So, and that this is the scheme and this is the program that is going to enable you to make that transformational step change. Part of that is about your track record, but it's about how you will build on your track record and understanding how and demonstrating that you understand how your research fits into a broader national and international landscape. So there's both there is the academic leadership aspect, the demonstrating your trajectory and how you're going to become an outstanding leader in your field. There's a second aspect which is to do with communication. So really demonstrating that you're both an outstanding thinker, communicator, and a disseminator of knowledge. And then the third aspect, and this is one which I think in some ways is the hardest if you're because in many ways it's the biggest leap, is that is being able to demonstrate that you can lead and inspire others, so that you're going to be able to head up a team, to develop new relationships, and that you have a really clear plan for how you and your team are going to develop through the course of the FLF. So if we can move on, thank you. And so again, think about that holistically. So in terms of your development, your academic development, if you are, I think this is something that comes up particularly if you're moving between disciplines, or if you're proposing a program of work that will, where you perhaps have experience in one particular discipline, but then you're bringing others together, is what do you need in order to do that? What do you need in order to develop as an individual? What do you need in order to make the step up to leading a team? And where are you seeking to get to through the FLF? So what kinds of training and what kinds of development, formal and informal, do you need? How are you going to support your team? And I think it's often helpful to think back to when you were at their kind of stage. So if you're writing in research assistants or you're planning to work with PhD students, think about what helped you at that stage, or what would have helped you if you didn't have it. So really think about the different kinds of support that individual members of your team might need, as well as you yourself. I think the other thing, as Georgina mentioned, is when you're thinking about the composition of your team and who you're writing into it, whether those are named individuals or particular roles and kinds of expertise, is really thinking through and making a clear case for why exactly those roles or those individuals are needed, what it is that each of those people will bring, and how those will all work together. And then I think lastly on this aspect, and I've mentioned some of those, in terms of development, this can take many forms. So think about the practical skills or training that you think you might need. Do you need them to undertake particular aspects of your project? It might be technical skills, digital skills, or it might be skills that are to do with working with particular groups. Soft skills and particular kinds of attributes that are really, really valuable for this kind of scheme, where you're moving from perhaps more of an individual research profile to working as part of a team and intending to build those new relationships. So really the skills, the attributes that go along with communication, networking, and getting the most out of those that you work with, understanding those team dynamics and how to ensure that what you're leading is genuinely collaborative. And then leadership. I think this is something that that warrants a lot of thought. It's not necessarily something that is always easy to think instantly of how you've demonstrated leadership, but there are many, many different ways of demonstrating it, and it can be both in your academic background, but it could be in completely different parts of your life that you've demonstrated leadership. So, you know, again, think holistically about you as an individual and how you will develop that through the FLF. And then mentorship, as Georgina has already mentioned, is a really good thing to think about, both your mentorship of the team that you will lead, but also the value of having a mentor either within your organisation or outside the organisation, or both, who can really help you to develop through it. So I think that's it from me.
Thank you both so much. So thank you for kind of sharing from your perspective what makes a competitive FLF application, and for kind of structuring your advice in relation to the FLF assessment criteria, which I'm sure people will find extremely useful. I have just posted a link to the FLF assessment criteria in the chat function, which I'd strongly encourage you to kind of read through, memorise, etc. when developing your application. We are taking notes of all the questions that are coming in. There are AHRC colleagues in the background just kind of filtering them now. We will address them shortly. Just bear with us. We might not be able to get round to all of them. Those that we can't answer, we'll obviously get in touch with you after the event. So for now, it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to two of our FLF award holders, Dr. Joseph Linley and Dr. Ruth Nugent, who have taken the time out of their busy fellowships and at the moment to kind of talk you through their experiences applying to the FLF scheme. So I'd like to now invite Dr. Ruth Nugent to the stage, should we say?
Thank you, Jess. Hello, everyone. I'm going to try and attempt to share my screen as well. So let's see what can possibly go wrong here. Okay. Is that all right? Can people see that? Excellent. Brilliant. So yes, I'm really excited to be involved with this, and I've been involved with a few of these kind of introductory things for people applying to the UKRI, and I'm massively excited to be able to talk to people individually as well. So if you're interested in contacting me, I know I'm throwing open like Pandora's box here given the number of you, but I do absolutely am always happy to talk to people about individual things, about my project, or things that I can help with. So I'm an archaeologist. and I'm at the University of Liverpool with Georgina, and I had a really early application. I was round 2, so there weren't many of us as arts and humanities people at the time. So I've been on my fellowship since November 2019. I work on a project called the Human Remains, the Digital Library of Historic British Mortuary Science and Investigation. I'd recommend coming up with shorter titles than me. That's the first thing I'd recommend. And I was looking at, or I still am looking at, a cross-sector thing. So I'm dealing with both historical research at the intersection of digital humanities, which allows us to expedite that research very quickly and feed that research into interests that our stakeholders have, which for me is the church communities in England, Scotland and Wales, who are having to manage historic burial environments. So we're looking at histories of exhumation and burial movement. We're looking at how people have perceived this, how they've actually done it, and the ethics behind it. So that's kind of a quick overview of what I'm looking at, and there's various things the project's involved with. And like Georgina was saying, I want to just reflect on kind of things I wish I'd known and things that I would really recommend as someone who's applying for a UKRI. So in terms of pitching your proposal, I think one of the things that we can do, particularly in arts and humanities, is frame it. Think of a way of framing it as a problem in society that you were solving. Why you? Why now? Is it relevant now? Why here at this host organisation, wherever you choose? And where are we headed without this research? And that's one of the ways I pitched it in my interview. I was very clear that we had bought ourselves time in the 1850s with law changes about introducing cremation and reducing burial pressure by not allowing burial inside churches. But very quickly, we've run out of that sort of grace period that those laws brought, and we're now back in a situation of a burial crisis. So I was framing it as, this is a problem from our society, and if you don't take me, this will remain a problem because I seem to be the only one that's in the position to kind of lead this forwards at the moment. So is there a way that you can frame it as a problem in society? And therefore, what do the public get out of this? And there's been lots of sort of mentions this already, so I won't go into too much detail about it, but how can they be involved? How can they contribute? So for me, I've got co-creation with people who are called the Friends of Cathedrals, and these are lay, regular people who are just really committed to their cathedral, promoting it, education, fundraising, and getting them involved in actually creating case studies with us of examples of what's happened with the burials in their own churches and things like that. So the first question is, who is your public? The public is not monolithic. There are lots of publics. So think about, in a sense, who's your tribe? Who are the people in society who really care about what you care about? It's not going to be everyone. It doesn't need to be everyone, but it does need to be some group or groups. And why would they care? Think about, therefore, what is the entry point for talking to these groups? Maybe you're already in conversation with them. There's a whole range of different groups out there. But think about, do you need to go in at grassroots level with the people who are actually on the front line of it? Is social media the best way to do this? Is it private conversations because maybe it's a sensitive issue? Are you aware of the politics that's going on? So have a really clear idea. And how can you maximize the number of people in that group who would want to be involved? So again, you don't have to get everyone in the United Kingdom involved in your research, but you do want to try and hit as many groups or people within those groups that want to be involved. And so one of the things that I learned after I'd done my fellowship proposal, which I wish I'd known at the time, was this thing called mapping stakeholders. And you can also use this to map your mentor groups, which I'll talk about in a minute. It is very easy to Google. There's lots of things, lots of diagrams like this that are available to you. But essentially you start to divide up the people who are interested in your research into those who are high influence, but with low stakes. So they have high interest, but they're not maybe going to make a massive contribution. Those who've got low influence and quite low stakes, those who've got low influence but are really high stakes, so they might be more the lower level of the organisations you're interested in working with, but they have a massive amount of interest in what you're doing. And then of course your top priorities are those who've got high influence to help you, and also they have a high level of investment in you being successful. So have a think about what you can do with that. And again, a quick Google, you'll find lots of discussions easy to access and diagrams about completing this kind of thing. So you can do it for your external collaborators, but also for your mentors. The other thing I would recommend in thinking about this, fellowships are not about a project, they're about you. They're about an investment in your career, not just what's happening during the fellowship, but the person you will become once the fellowship has been completed. So ensure that in your application, you're making it clear you are intrinsic to the success of the research, i.e. no one but you could pull this off because of your unique background of your research, your unique contacts, your unique interests. And think very carefully, because the last thing you want is for people at the interview to go, yeah, it's a great idea, but literally anyone could come and do this. We could literally parachute someone in with better qualifications to come and do this. So you have to kind of really intertwine yourself with the idea that you're kind of playing with as your application idea. And think about clearly, what kind of leader do you want to become? There are many different kinds of leaders within and beyond academia. So what exactly do you want to lead, and what are the pathways? Are you looking at someone else's career that could help you here, that you think, yeah, they've taken a particular career route and that's where I'd like to end up? Or are you kind of off the chart? It has not been mapped out in front of you before. Who can you talk to already, maybe in your institution or within your particular field or discipline, and maybe ask to have like a conversation, an interview, just find out, how did you get to where you are in what you're doing? Do you want to lead a research centre? Are you looking to end up doing consultancy? Do you want to lead a big network? Are you looking to move into commercialisation? Are you looking to go into like policy influence, as we mentioned before? What do you want to lead? Try and be more specific in that. Not just, I want to be the centre of the academic research, but beyond that, where does it go next? How do you build a community of people who also want to get involved with this, both inside and outside academia? So think about, therefore, what will be the legacy of the fellowship? You'll have to write about the legacy of any data that you create normally as part of applications to this. So be careful about creating stuff that will live or die with you as the fellow. But what will happen next? So if you are looking, if your university is offering maybe a PhD studentship with stipend and fees, are you looking to build, therefore, postgraduate community in this? Is this such a brand new area that would be really relevant? Or are you actually looking to do sort of more knowledge exchange work and maybe get involved with the knowledge exchange programs that are available? Think about what the legacy of the fellowship is going to be. It can be hard to understand right now what that could be, but certainly some, you know, informal inquiries and just having a think about, what kind of academic do you want to be? Because this is your opportunity to mold that career path, not just I'll have X number of monographs and I'll get X amount of funding and I'll get a permanent position, but what exactly is the nature of your leadership? What exactly are you going to lead, and what kind of academic do you want to ensure you become at the end of it? So emphasize your uniqueness as a strength. Tell your story. I was a mature student. I come from a background in the church. I'd workshopped with churches on things before. I already had understanding of some of the issues that they had from things I'd done on my PhD. There were all these little pockets of things that I'd already done. And for the first time, I was able to bring them together into something of more a coherent story about who I am, where I've come from, and how both my academic and non-academic strengths and interests have created a unique person that stands in the middle of that movement that I'm trying to kind of build for people who have a really key interest in what we're doing with burial and exhumation in the historic environment. So think about not only your academic work, which of course is unique to you. If you've done PhD, you've done masters, of course these things are going to be unique to you, but your contacts will be unique to you, your experiences inside and outside of academia. So get a handle on what exactly they're investing in, not just in the research, but the person they're investing in. The other thing I would recommend as well, which I'm thinking through again, even though I'm about nearly a year into my fellowship, is the mentorship groups you might want to build to support you. And I had initially in my application one mentorship group who were predominantly academics, who I'd approached, and they were very keen to be involved, and each of them brought a different aspect to the academic research I'm doing. But what I'm now doing is splitting that up into kind of subfields and inviting some new people. And I've been very fortunate. I've had other people offer to be involved in my project. So thinking about a technical mentorship group, because I'm working with computational analysis, the academic side of things, so the archaeology and the history, but also people who are just more interested in my career. And I want to mentor that. They may not be as interested in the academic and technical side. The policy stuff that I'm doing, and also things like external liaisons, the groups that actually are heavily invested in your research and can guide you as to how to continue to engage with certain external groups. So think about it as a way that you can subdivide mentorship groups, if that's helpful for you. So use your weaknesses as a strength in the application. You're saying, this is why I'm applying to the UKRI, because I want to upskill, I want to be stretched, I want to get training I wouldn't normally be able to get. but also be able to explain what your own strengths already are. So one of my peer reviewers asked in my application, you're quite early in your career, you're only 2 years out of your PhD, you want to lead quite a large research team. What experience does she even have of leading a research team before? Fortunately, as an archaeologist, I could point to supervising excavations and supervising survey work. So there is a sense, as someone mentioned before, you need to show that you're already on a trajectory towards leadership in some capacity. But I could also say this is something I'm really looking to capitalise on as getting a fellowship, is getting that training, so quickly out of the starting blocks of a PhD, and be able to get that advance. So a couple of final things. When you've got draft material, one of the things that I found really helpful was to tell them what you want them to comment on, because everybody has their own ideas about what they think they're going to bring to your drafts. Do you just want them to do line edits and spelling checks? Do you want them to just focus on one particular part, like just focus on the stuff I'm talking about impact, or focus on my research questions because I'm not happy about that? Not all commentators are useful to comment on the whole entire application, and they are long applications, so sometimes it's easy to just say, could you just look at this one page or this one section for me and ignore the rest, and have such a clear idea of what you want to achieve with the fellowship, because you'll get a lot of suggestions from well-meaning people. Oh, you could do this and you could do that, and it can still look new and shiny, or you can get a lot of anxiety thinking, oh, maybe I should do that, I hadn't thought of that. But you need to be able to step back and go, no, this is what I want to do. This is the academic I want to become. This is the leader I want to be. This is what the project and the fellowship is going to achieve. It's a great idea, but it's not the right time for this, or it's not within my remit. Otherwise, you can just end up quite overwhelmed. So readers of drafts are useful to gauge their interest in being involved. So if you're approaching mentors, that might be a way to see if that would be a useful working relationship, and have your own deadlines with them. Make it clear that you've given yourself enough time to actually rewrite things if they're coming back with quite heavy corrections. The start date that you recommend, think about that, particularly if you're going to have to work any notice based on notification of the award. The embargo, there is normally like a 3-month embargo, so you'll be told but you can't tell anyone, which massively impacts hiring staff because you can't advertise the staff during that embargo, or I certainly couldn't. So you might have to wait, a good 6 to 8 weeks before you can actually even start hiring your staff. And if it's anything like me, there's quite a lot of admin to do anyway, so give yourself a more gentle run up in the first opening months when you're planning your work plan and things like that. And then feasibility, where will it end? What's the line in the sand, as you can see in the background there? What will a successful project look like to you? How will you know you're done and that it worked? And that only you can really answer. But if you haven't got that clear in your mind, and it's just this open-ended thing that could go on forever and ever and ever, well, a lot of research is like that. We can always ask more questions, but you do need to have an idea of where you would actually finish. And so just some preparation ideas when you're planning for a UKRI things. You don't have to wait for the fellowship to start doing some of these things anyway. Is there any in-house training you can take at your host university? Or right now we've got a lot of online training that's going on for free from all kinds of places. Interview training, unconscious bias training, PI training, project management training, impact and ref, parliamentary review training, technical training in a certain software, media training, etc. And just ensure that your online presence, your social media, any staff profiles you have actually reflect the work that you are going to do. And it allows you to build your contacts and your networks and kind of show a clean pair of hands to your interview panel. And I think that's everything I'm going to say for now. I hope that was useful.
Thank you so much, Ruth, again, for taking time out of your fellowship to kind of share your experiences applying to the FLF scheme, which I'm sure prospective applicants will find extremely useful. I'm now delighted to introduce you to another fantastic FLF award holder from our community, Dr. Joseph Lindley. He's here. Wonderful.
Hi. I think I do have a slide deck, but I think I'll just share it at the end because it's essentially a load of bullet points. So I'll just stay on the camera. It's amazing to be here because only a few months ago I was in the kind of workshop you're in and found it incredibly valuable. So I was absolutely delighted to come and try to be as helpful as I can be. Oh dear, that was my email bonging. I'll turn it off. Yeah, so this is just some reflections on why you might apply for an FLF, what you might do and how to do it. I think there's going to be quite a lot of repetition, but this will be obviously my perspective on it. So hopefully it will be useful. The first thing, a couple of caveats and an introduction. My fellowship hasn't actually started yet. I've pushed the start date back to November. Another caveat, I consistently worry that they might find out that it's me they awarded this thing to. That's probably just a case of imposter syndrome, but I'm still grappling with it a little bit. By the way, hello Joanna, who happened to be on my interview panel, so that was lovely to see you pop up. So with those things in mind, my fellowship is about to begin. It's called the Design Research Works, and it's all around the future of the design research movement and how powerful an idea that is to understand our relationships with technology. I'm absolutely happy to give my perspective here as well. I'm pleased to be taking part, but I think it's important to remember that with regards to your area, you are the expert. You need to play to your strengths and need to choose which bits of advice to follow. So take everything you hear today with a pinch of salt. It's going to be incredibly useful, but maybe some things will be contradictory and so on. So first, some notes on putting together the application. I think it's imperative that you read the call again and again and again, read the guidance and read the guidance for reviewers. Knowing those things as well as you can do, bear in mind how you would probably review your own application. How would you be critical of your application with the guidance for reviewers in front of you? Accepting all of those things though, then just go for the criteria head on. I think there's no shame in just saying in your application, I meet this criteria in this way. There's no need for a round the houses argument, just go for them head on. Secondly, I think it's important to give the application the time it deserves. I was in a postdoc position at the time with a understanding boss and had the luxury of essentially treating the FLF application as a full-time job for over a month. Now that's a luxury that I had, and maybe not everyone will have it, but really do try to give it the time it deserves. There's a lot of work that goes in there. Get as much feedback as possible. This has been mentioned by various speakers already, but I think it's crucial. Feedback from prior applicants is good. Feedback from applicants to other similar schemes is good. What I found to be incredibly valuable was feedback from people that have sat on interview panels and review panels to get an insight as to how the application is actually judged when there's people sitting around the table and deciding whether you will progress or not. That was really, really handy. And of course, look at successful applications and don't limit them to your particular area. I looked at applications from things far and wide, very distant from the kind of work I do, but still benefited from that. So yeah, don't rule out looking at somebody who's an astrophysicist or in some other discipline. So why the Future Leaders Fellowship is something that I think is important to consider, and there's a whole bunch of different reasons why people might apply, and I'm really just going to share my perspective on it. This time last year I was an early career researcher. I had a couple of postdocs under my belt and I was looking to carve out the future of my career. I believed I fitted the criteria, therefore. I believed I had a viable project that I could justify in the terms that other speakers have already discussed. So why not? It's a brilliant opportunity and go for it. But remember that you do have to show why you and your project and your institution align to those criteria that the scheme has, both in terms of research, but also in terms of leadership. Now, I created a proposal specifically for the FLF, bearing all of that stuff in mind, and it did, as is sometimes the case if you've submitted something that wasn't successful, it had DNA from a prior application, but I had to forget that prior application and specifically rebuild the rhetoric for the FLF. So I think it's important that everybody does that. And if you can't make your idea or project or your CV align with the scheme naturally, then I suspect it's probably not for you. It's rare that that's going to be the case if you're here, but don't try to fit a round thing in a square hole. Just consider that. Some notes on host institutions. So I'm at Lancaster University and I happened to already be there. I went there to do my PhD 8 years ago and did postdocs there and applied for my FLF through Lancaster as well. Now, just be aware that that's fine if that institution is the best place to do the work. You need to ask yourself, is the place I want to be the best place possible to do this? And that answer needs to be yes. And you also need to explain why the answer is yes. Also, again, I think this has been mentioned, but demonstrating proper commitment from the institution is really crucial. Now that comes in multiple dimensions. It might be some form of cash, or in my case, that Lancaster are funding a PhD student, but they must show long-term commitment. And that commitment needs to be demonstrated through a genuine letter of support. I suggest you don't take a kind of letter of support template and fill your name in the blank. Whoever's writing the letter really needs to understand who you are, how you're relevant to the university, and how your project is relevant to the scheme and how they're going to support you. So get a genuine letter of support from your institution. Now, in terms of development, the FLF needs to be transformational. It needs to be transformational for your area, but also for you. So you need to consider how you're going to transform yourself to help you transform your field. And that might involve lots of bits and pieces. It may be leadership coaching or some kind of relevant training in management or finance or project management, or academic upskilling. In my case, I want to adopt an ethno-methodological approach for the first time, and for that reason have got a co-I on board who's an expert in that area, and one of my RAs is more experienced than that in that space than I am, so they can help me develop. The FLF scheme will support and encourages that. So a clear and well-resourced development plan is actually a strength, and don't be shy of funding that if you need to. I did a couple of notes on the post-review PI response. So if you submit your application and you get reviews back, you have an opportunity to reply there. At that point, I think it's imperative to get as much advice as possible from people that have done that before, or people who may have dealt with PI responses before. So speak to your co-Is, your mentors, colleagues, research support in your organization, if you have that there. A strategy, which again, this is just general stuff, but a useful strategy, I think, is responding to reviewer 3's negative points with reviewer 1's positive, if you can. Remember to be kind and compassionate to the reviewers. They're not trying to be mean to you, even if it comes across that way. They're trying to be helpful. So be kind in what you say, but also, of course, be firm and argue your case with evidence. And remember, you're not replying directly to the reviewers. You're replying to a panel who will see your application. They'll see the reviews and your response. So formulate what you write on that basis. And at the end of the day, the PI response is an opportunity to show how strong you are and why you are an excellent candidate for the scheme. So use that opportunity wisely. I think that's really all I wanted to say. And I understand there is a bit of repetition there, but hopefully getting multiple perspectives on the same stuff will end up being useful. Finally, just notes on my fellowship so far. I feel a bit like the start to Star Wars. So it was a long time ago in a proposal far, far away that I had project plans and schedules, partnerships and methodologies, and absolutely none of them took account for a global pandemic. So I've delayed the start of my fellowship, as I said, and I'm significantly refiguring it so that I can achieve the aims notwithstanding COVID-19. And thankfully, the scheme is flexible enough to support me in that. I do have a website up and running. I'm convening my steering committee, recruiting PhDs and RAs, and just really excited to get going. I will paste into the chat a link to a PowerPoint file which has all of what I just said on it if you want to remind yourself. But there you go. Hope that's useful. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Joseph. We've now all been on Zoom for about an hour and a half, so I'm going to suggest shuffling the agenda a little bit. So I'm going to suggest let's go for a 5-minute break. So come back at 25 to 3, and then we'll kick off with Q&A, and then I'll bring back Georgina and Joanna to kind of talk us through how to prepare for the FLF FLF interview, and what we mean by added value. So I'll see you all shortly in 5 minutes. Thank you. It's been recorded. And we'll go from there. So without further ado, I'm going to invite my colleague Holly, who is going to read out the questions that have been submitted so far. Holly, are you there?
Yes, hello. So the first question I have is for you, Steve, if you're okay to answer on behalf of the UKRI team.
Hello, yep, sure.
So the first question I have is, how do I demonstrate equivalent experience to a PhD?
So the reason that we state this is to allow the FLF awards to support a diverse number of candidates from a whole range of different backgrounds, and people who aren't necessarily following the traditional routes into a fellowship. So, you may have been based in a business, or you may have been, have been undertaking research or working on something that hasn't specifically been part of a PhD. So really it's going and looking at the person specification that we have on our website, looking to see whether or not you meet those criteria, and then just looking to show that the skills and experience that you've developed over, the recent period of time, fit those criteria. So it's really for you to look at what you've got as a person, as an applicant, and fit to those criteria to try and best demonstrate how you've got equivalent experience. But, we understand people based in business, for example, won't have a PhD, but probably have as much experience as a person that's undertaken a PhD. So it's really for you to fit your skills the best to those criteria.
Fantastic, thank you. The next question also for you probably links on very well. How do you know if previous grants you have held makes you already established?
So I saw in the chat there were a few questions about, specific grant schemes and, whether or not they affect the eligibility. We don't provide a list of, of specific schemes and whether or not they make you eligible or not. And it's very different for people in different sectors. Again, it's a case of looking at, if you've had a very large program grant, like a multi-million-pound Strength in Places grant or something you've been in the PI on, you're probably too experienced for this scheme. Similarly, if you've had an award that's at an equivalent level, so another one's very much focused on that transition to independence, you've had equivalent funding, and unless there has been something particular that's that meant you haven't managed to achieve that, and there's a good reason for you to come in to receive the same type of funding again, you probably wouldn't be eligible. As for the other funding that's available, it's really important for you to again, justify why this is going to make a difference that, say, a previous project grant or so on hasn't, what difference is it going to make to your career that the previous funding hasn't done? So again, it's all down for you to justify, where you fit with the funding. If you're unsure, you can come to us with specific examples and we can guide you. We're willing to have a conversation with you, and we have members in the team that are free to do that.
Fantastic, thank you. And I will make sure when I've finished answering questions, we link the email address for the fellows into the chat box.
Sure.
So one maybe more straightforward question. Is it possible to have 2 host organisations?
So yes, it's possible to be a member of 2 different host organisations. On your application, the funding will go to one. So you would have one that would be your main host for this, but then you could via funds across to the second one for different parts of the application. It would, yeah, you can be based in multiple organisations, but there would be one lead host organisation on your application.
Fantastic, thank you. Very much. Okay, so Georgina, I've had a question sent in that's more directed towards your presentation. In setting out an ambitious proposal, how important is it that proposals go beyond the focus of one case or country? Is ambition defined by the breadth of focus, or can ambition also be viewed in terms of the depth of engagement or impact that a future leader fellow will have in one specific context?
Wow, that's a great question, and a really important one as well. And I think it's about thinking about you as an individual, but also a program as opposed to a project, really. So I think, you know, it's about extension and reach in that context. So if you've got an idea that requires a longer term approach, for example, or requires you to reach beyond what would normally be achieved within a project, then it's within scope. I don't think it's that easy to say whether, you know, a particular program of work that focuses on one case study or one country is necessarily in or out of remit. I think it's about the ambition for that program of research and what it will mean to you as an independent and individual researcher. So ambition is kind of defined in that way. If it's going to be transformative for you, transformative for the idea that you've got, and it's a program of work as opposed to a project that could be achieved with a traditional fellowship or an existing project grant, then it's an FLF. I don't know whether any of my colleagues want to come in on that as well. Oh.
It was a very thorough answer, Georgina.
Yeah.
Maybe that's it. That's how I see it as well. I don't know whether Steve, you were going to come in.
No, I was just going to echo what you say. It's it's very difficult to speak across all different projects without seeing what the project is. Yeah, it's for you to make the case on the importance of the particular work you're doing and the impact that it will have.
Exactly.
Fantastic, thank you both. Joanna, this one relates somewhat to your presentation. Do you have any recommendations for how to approach non-HEIs you may want to collaborate with?
Yes. Sorry, just switching on. Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I guess there is no single way of doing this. I think there are a couple of things I would say. One is that it can often be quite difficult to find from the internet who you should be contacting. So I think the probably, you know, if you don't have a contact within an organization and you're approaching them you know, completely out of the blue, I think both be mindful of that when you're getting in touch. Let's say you're emailing them and you might have to be going through a generic email account. Try and find the one that you think is most appropriate, but word your email in such a way that you realize, you know, they may not be the right person, and you know, can they pass you on to somebody else? I know it sounds really obvious, but sometimes it just sort of helps smooth the way. And I think in order to do that, in order to locate who you think might be best, again, it's really about thinking in advance what it is that you want to do with that organisation. So is it that you want to explore the potential for them to be a research collaborator? You know, in which case, if it's an institution like mine, then you would come to me. Is it more to do with public engagement? Is it more to do with learning? Is it something that combines all of those? And so that might help you to identify how to find the right way in. I think this is also why I said try and contact them well in advance, because you might find that it takes, particularly if you don't have a direct contact, then it might take a while to find the right person, for them to be able to get back to you, for you to have a conversation about it. Yeah, and I think also obviously discuss it with whoever is helping you put the application together. I think that's a really important part of identifying potential partners or non-HEIs. There may be institutional partnerships already and contacts that you can that can help you there. I think the other thing I would just say on that is what you don't want to do, I think, is send a really long description of your project, a draft application, and then say, and it's due next week, you know, would you be interested in collaborating? And I'm not suggesting that any of you would do that, but I have experienced it. So I think, you know, give just, again, if you can get in touch, you're very much introducing yourself, your research, and then I think, you know, obviously framing it in a way that it is likely to be of interest to that particular organization. So rather than a kind of generic approach that you're sending out to 25 organizations, really think again about tailoring it to the particular institution that you're trying to contact.
Fantastic, thank you. Due to purposes of time, I'm just going to ask one more question, but we do have the supplementary document that is linked right at the top of the chat, and we will take a note of any questions you're asking to try and get back to them. So this one's probably for Joanna and Steve. So in relation to partners, how do you view the decision to recruit an organisation as a partner who can't get paid versus a collaborator where they can get paid, e.g. expensing its contributions? Whilst it makes sense to ask for a profit business to be a partner pro bono, it seems to make less sense to ask a non-profit charity like a think tank to donate its time and resources.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I will just say a few words and then pass over to Steve. I think the first thing is to really look at the different responsibilities that being a partner involves and being a collaborator involves, and think really hard about what it is that you are looking for in relation to your proposal, because that's obviously critical. I think you're very right to raise the issue of costs. Certainly speaking from the cultural sector, it's often really, really difficult for cultural institutions. I come from a very large one, but one that is extremely busy all the time, and smaller organisations are even less likely to have spare time or resources to be able to contribute. So if you are able to, if you think that actually you're looking for something that is about collaboration and that costs can be built in to support that collaboration, then it is I would say it is definitely worth pursuing. I think the other aspect of that is you need to think about what you would be asking people to do, the amount of time you would be asking them to commit. Is it, you know, if you're wanting to work with community groups, for example, then is there a way of at least providing a contribution to the time for them getting involved? So I think it's something that that requires a lot of thought, but I'll pass over to Steve in terms of the scheme.
Yes, I mean, in terms of the scheme, I'd firstly echo what Joanna says. I mean, really, you're looking at what you're involving these partners for and what the most appropriate role is. So you really need to be working with the one that is most appropriate to meet the aims and objectives of your scheme. In terms of, you know, passing money across to different partners, we're flexible, and there's a number of different ways we can do that. So, you know, if you're unsure on whether or not somebody that you're looking to work with can receive funding, you know, you can always work with them as subcontractors and things like that if you want to get them engaged and you need to pass funds over to them. So we can be somewhat flexible and have a conversation with you around that. One of the things I'd note are the slight differences if you're working with commercial partners who might be advising you on things. Again, are the differences that you would see between the different types of relationships that you could have. So, you know, were you to use a third party, for example, as a sounding board for sort of public insight into what you were doing, were they to be a subcontractor, that's a fairly straightforward relationship. If they are a partner that you're working with and they're intricately involved in the work that you're doing, you know, if there could potentially be sort of intellectual property or something arising from the work that you're doing, that you'd be need to be very careful about the relationship that you're forging with them, and the terms around intellectual property are thought out ahead of it, because this would need to remain with the university and not end up in the hands of the commercial partner as a result of its initial funding. It's state aid rules, but you know, we can advise specifically on that. But yeah, just things to think about.
Fantastic, Matt. Thank you. I will pass back to Jess, who will set us up for the next section.
Thank you so much, Holly, and thank you again to our speakers for taking time to answer the questions. I believe I'm now going to pass you over to Joanna Norman, who's going to kind of talk you through how to best prepare for the FLF interview.
Oh, amazing. It's there already. Thank you. Thank you, Jess. So I'm just going to run through quickly some of the key points about the interview. Obviously, these are said from the point of view of having been on the panel as an interviewer, which is the only way I can speak about this. So the format that the interview takes, as has been mentioned already, is that it will be about 30 to 40 minutes. First of all, you have the chance to do a presentation, which I think is 7 minutes long. It's very specific. Then there is a series of questions, and those questions take the same format and are indeed principally the same questions. I'll come to that in a second, for all applicants. So that the intention being that it is, it's a very, very fair process. The interviewers will come from a mix of different disciplines, and possibly from outside academia, like myself. I think from memory, there are usually about 6 or 7 interviewers. And then, as Steve mentioned earlier, there are usually roving panel members. And the roving panel members are there to observe the panel rather than you. And that is to ensure consistency across the different panels that are happening concurrently, and to ensure that we're all conducting the interviews in the same kind of way, scoring consistently and being fair in how we approach it. So then, moving on to the way that the interview works. Generally, there will be a chair of the interview panel who will manage it, and then 3 members of the panel who will lead the questions. And each of those 3 will ask you questions about a distinct aspect of the application. And these obviously reflect the things that we've already talked about in terms of the things that you have to demonstrate as part of your application, and that it will be assessed on at each of the different stages. So the first is the research and innovation, your project and the proposed programme of work. Second is around leadership, and the third is around career development. Now, to start with, so you do your presentation, and I think this is the chance that you have to really present your proposal and you yourself as the applicant in a way that is not just reliant on your written proposal. So the panel will, of course, have read all of the paperwork that you have submitted as part of the application. They will have read the reviewers' reviews, they will have read your PI response, they will have read any comments that have been, they won't have read all of the comments from the SIF panel, but they will have some kind of headline points. But they won't have heard you speak in your own voice, of course, because they won't have met you. So this is really the chance to introduce your project, to enthuse about it, and to say all of the really important things that Ruth and Joseph mentioned about why it's important and why it is so appropriate for the scheme, and why you deserve to be awarded an FLF. So you do your presentation, and then the questions in this first area, research and innovation, are where there is most flexibility, because they are directly related to your proposal. Although bear in mind that they're not necessarily going to be asked by subject specialists, and what they will be based on is any questions that were raised by the reviewers and perhaps not felt to have been answered as well as they might have been, or as fully as they might have been in your PI response, or and that the SIFT panel may feel are still outstanding questions that they'd really like you to clarify. But there's also a question which is about any key changes since you have submitted your proposal. And I think it's important here just to remember the timeline that was mentioned right at the beginning of this session, which is that you will have had several months between coming up with your idea, submitting your proposal, and then finally getting to the interview. So when the interviewer, whoever is interviewing you, asks about any key changes, they're not really thinking about practical changes, but they're thinking about things that might have moved on in your field. They might be key changes that have happened to you. That might be publications. It might be that you've secured some funding from elsewhere. It's those kinds of things that would actually, that are really beneficial for the panel to be aware of, because they help because they're relevant to you and to your proposal. So that's the first area. So I think in terms of preparing for that, obviously the one key thing to do is to think about how best to present it in the limited time that you have. I think most, if not all, of the applicants that I've seen have practiced timing themselves giving their presentation to make sure that they're not worried about time, because they know that they've really honed it, and I think that's a very useful thing to practice. But also, obviously, you know, go back over the paperwork, go back over the reviewers' comments, so that you can really prepare for things that you think might be questions that come up. The second area, which is around leadership and impact, we talked about this earlier, and this is really where you are asked how you have demonstrated leadership in the past. I think Ruth spoke about this really well earlier, which is thinking holistically about it, about what the different examples are that you may have experienced and demonstrated, and you may be drawing them from quite different parts of your career, but really, you know, giving some quite concrete examples. And then the likelihood is that there will be another question relating to leadership and impact that may again come out of the reviewers' comments or the SIF panel. And then what I think many find is the most difficult question of all, which is about how you would describe your project to a member of the public with no knowledge of your field. So when you're and it sounds a really easy thing to do and a really obvious thing to do, but I think often when you're put on the spot, perhaps it's one of those things that is difficult to encapsulate in only a few words. And that's not surprising, because you're probably presenting really quite complex projects on ideas that may not be familiar to many members of the public. So again, I think this is something where really thinking hard about, you know, what is it that is absolutely at the core of it, and that is the most important thing that you would, and how can you describe that in a way that is absolutely understandable to anyone, and that is going to really convince them of the importance of this particular proposal. And then lastly, the last section of the interview is about the applicant development and the fellowship management. And this is really where the questions relate to what we talked about earlier in terms of you and why you are the right person to be leading this particular proposal, and how you, what difference the FLF would make to your career. The word transformational has been used several times this afternoon, and I think it is one of the most important words to keep in mind, because it really is about making a step change. So it's really thinking about what the difference is that the FLF would affect, how your chosen host organisation will support you in that, and that kind of support, as you've heard earlier, is about both the practical kinds of support and the academic support. So it's the sort of research environment that you'll be in, it's the infrastructure that surrounds you, it's the training opportunities, it's the mentorship, it's the networks that you will be part of through that, all of those different aspects that we talked about earlier. how you will support others in their career development. This goes back to what we were talking about in terms of building a team, and if you are proposing to have, say, research assistants working with you, or if you're proposing to have to develop relationships with other kinds of groups, with PhD students, if that's part of your proposal, how are you going to, what are the practical things as well as the more holistic things that you're going to do to support them? EDI was mentioned earlier, equality, diversity and inclusion, as something that Steve mentioned often, I think is often not considered perhaps as deeply as it might be. And I think it's really important that you think about that and really think about how that's going to be part of your proposal. And so being able to talk to the panel about that is really important. And then again, there may be one more question that is specifically comes out of the reviewers' comments and perhaps the SIFT panel's thoughts on the reviewers' comments and your response to it. And then finally, there may be one final question from the chair, if there's anything that has not been addressed from the SIFT panel comments, and then there will be a chance for you to ask a question at the end. And that's it. And I think the one last thing I would say is that it is obviously a daunting process, the interview, but the structures and the processes that UKRI and AHRC put in place through the FLF scheme for the interviews are really, really rigid. As panelists, we have really comprehensive briefings beforehand, so we have very, very clear guidance on how we should be conducting the interview. And as I mentioned at the beginning, you know, we are being observed to make sure that we are being fair with all the candidates and consistent in our questioning and in our scoring. And then I think the other thing is that obviously if you've got to the interview, then you are in a really competitive position and you've done fantastically well to get to that stage. So although it will be nerve-wracking, it's also the most fantastic opportunity for you to present your proposal and you as the applicant to a group of panelists who are really interested and delighted to learn more about your project. So I hope, like the whole process, that it can be something that that is a positive experience and not too much of a terrifying one.
Thank you so much, Joanna. And I'm going to pass you over to Georgina, who's going to talk you through what we mean by added value and how to tell the story of your development.
Okay, hopefully you've got full screen and you can hear me and everything's working okay. Great. Well, thank you very much indeed. There might be a bit of repetition here, but I think we're reinforcing some really important points. So added value, you will see this through the documentation, and you will hear other FLFs talk about this, people who've already got their leadership fellowships in place. And really what we're trying to say here is to think through the FLF as a more than kind of project. It's not a project, it's a program. So this is not just a fellowship, it's a future leaders fellowship. And I might be plagiarizing Marks and Spencer's there, but nonetheless, that's the way in which you could think about this. It's not the mundane, I mean, not that fellowships are mundane, but it's not the regular fellowship. It's a very different type of program of work. And what you need to be asking yourself all the way through your preparation of the application is, why do I need an FLF? Why do I need to be applying to this particular funding scheme? And is this the right funding scheme for my proposed programme of work? Will the scale and flexibility and duration of what I'm planning fit the scheme? If it can be done in 3 years and it can be done in a standard fellowship, apply for that. If you think that you need that kind of vision, that longer term view, then think about the FLF and think about the fact that the FLF offers that added kind of value, that opportunity to be a bit more expansive. So it's more than a regular fellowship. And I think it's important to think about added value across all the criteria as well. So research and innovation, yourself and your own development, impact and strategic relevance, and innovation, environment, and costs. So it's added value across all of those different criteria. It's not just in any one area. So in terms of research and innovation, it's about what's distinctive, what could be outstanding. Is the overall potential for you as a fellow to establish a new and distinctive contribution to your area or a set of areas, or to a particular interdisciplinary field. So it's about thinking about those kinds of words. What makes this an outstanding and distinctive contribution? Why is it important? Where's the novelty? I think it's also really important to think about the added value for you. And this has already been mentioned by our Joseph and Ruth, and also Joanna, but it's about you. It's very much about your vision, your potential, developing your independent voice and your research agenda, establishing a team that will support you in your vision, that will allow them to develop as the next generation, working in that vision, working towards that vision, and helping establish a new research agenda in that context. And why you in particular are the best person to lead on that. That's really vital, and it comes through both in the application. It needs to be enforced in the application, but also will, as Joanna's just explained, will come up in the interview as well. So it's added value in terms of you, but why you, and what will be transformational for you. So it's that word again, transformational. What will allow you to develop your career into this new area? What will allow you to establish a career in the first place? So it's about establishing you as the leader in a particular field. It's added value also in terms of the way in which you become that leader, and how your career development enables you to become that leader. So we've said transformative. It's not sort of adding more to what you've already done. It's about the long view and looking into the distance, really, and thinking about the potential of what you could achieve through an FLF that couldn't be achieved through a different kind of funding source. And I'd encourage you not to just think about the length of time of the FLF, but where you want to be, really. And I think Ruth pointed to this as well. It's about, think to yourself, what kind of academic you want to be. Where do you want to be in 10 years, 15 years? Think with that kind of long visionary idea in mind, really. And think about how the FLF will enable you to develop as an individual, as a leader, in a transformative kind of way. So not doing the same kind of work that you've been doing, but maybe building on that, thinking forward, what would be the next step? How will you engage new people, work with new partners, develop a new methodological or set of methodological approaches to a new kind of question? So it's not additive, it's transformative. In terms of impact and relevance, much has been said about impact already, so I don't want to repeat that. But what I will say is it's about making a difference by doing things differently with your partners, thinking through different kind of pathways to impact, thinking about different ways of engaging new audiences, what types of impact can be developed, but also how will that impact be delivered. So I think what we've seen a lot of, and you see this in applications across the board, and a lot of us do this, but we talk about, well, we'll have a website and a blog, but it's thinking beyond that kind of normal. I think they're good and they're appropriate methodologies and pathways to impact, but think about different ways of doing things as well. There's lots of different opportunity when it comes to public engagement in arts and humanities. And we might want to think more broadly about the kinds of opportunities that you have, the portfolio of opportunity to make a difference. So think differently and think about added value that you might be able to achieve through pathways to impact, or new ways of co-creation with your partners, with different kinds of audiences, and with interdisciplinary focus as well, if you can, if that's appropriate to the program of work that you're approaching, that you're proposing. And think also in terms of added value, in terms of your environment and the context, and what's feasible in terms of building into your program of work. So what difference can you make to your institution or your the organization that you propose to be working with, who's hosting you? So they're going to be supporting you, but what will you offer in return? So what's the long-lasting legacy contribution that you're going to be making? You're establishing a new research group, for example. Think about what you can contribute, what could be complementary to that host organization, and what kind of commitment you can offer. You're building a team, you're bringing new researchers to the area, you may be developing a new technique or approach, and have that long-term vision again, if you can. Think to the future, think about what the strategic plan is in your institution and how you fit into that. That's all evidence of how you're thinking through your potential added value. And factor this into costings as well. I think we've seen bids and proposals that talk about establishing centres or establishing groups, but make sure that you're being feasible in the way in which you're talking through those things. So how will you cost that in? How will you ensure that after 4 years, you'll have the wherewithal to enable a centre around this research agenda to be developed? So be realistic, be visionary, be thinking to the future, but also be pragmatic, and make sure that you take advice in terms of how to build the costs in that you will need to enable those things to happen. I'm just going to add a couple of things around interview preparation as well. And I suppose this to some extent speaks to added value in a way. I think Joanna's already talked about what the brief is, and you have to stick to that. And I would practice and practice and practice some more and do some mock interviews. But I think what's really important, and something that's come across in all the panels that I've certainly sat in, and I've got to say, by the time somebody reaches that interview panel, they're obviously incredibly strong applicants because they've got through the SIFT and so on, very rigorous approaches that Joanna was talking about, and Steve earlier as well. But I think what really holds in our heads and what really makes a difference and comes into added value is excitement, enthusiasm and confidence in the interview. Be excited about the project because that's infectious, and that really makes a difference. I can remember Joseph's interview. I can remember other interviews of successful applicants because they make a difference. They're memorable because of the enthusiasm. Timing. I know I'm running through this presentation very speedily, but go at a healthy pace so that it's comprehensible. Make sure your slides are clear. Practice, do a mock interview, maybe do 2 mock interviews. This is where your host institution or your potential host institution can really help you. They could set up mock interview panels and help you with that process. And a good interview, it's about pace, it's about coverage. Don't repeat the application, as Joanna was saying. Think about what added value you can bring to the interview. What else can you add in? Impressions matter, as I've already said. Be prepared to encapsulate your proposed ideas very succinctly, especially for non-experts. We're a panel with very different kinds of experiences and different kinds of disciplinary backgrounds, partner organisation representatives, etc. So think about how you would explain something that is new to that audience. Be memorable, assured, committed to the idea. You want this programme of work to be happening, so show that level of commitment and show that you are the right person to undertake that proposed programme of work, why you are the right person to be the Future Leaders Fellow in that arena. And clarity of responses matters as well. So I've put a picture here of a long and winding road because I think the best responses have been those that are to the point and concise. You can normally tell from the interview panel if you're wandering off in a long and distant direction down a long and winding road, because you can get a gist from the interview panel or the representative on that interview panel who's asked the question. They can be nodding and then sort of making notes and ushering you to finish your response if it's going on a little bit too long. So try and be concise and answer the question. And then just one final slide from me. These are incredibly competitive FLFs. They're incredibly competitive fellowships. There's a lot of people who are interested in them for good reason. They're very exciting, unique opportunities for all different people from all different disciplinary backgrounds, and it's hugely exciting. And it might not work out, but it's never wasted effort. You can think about repurposing ideas, use the reviews to your advantage, think about different ways of going forward, think about new ways of configuring teams for different kinds of calls, and think about how the host institution can continue to support you in your journey as an academic. But I would say that, I think belief and persistence pays. If you've got a good idea, it usually floats in the end. Hopefully it's for an FLF. If it's not, there'll be other avenues of inquiry to pursue and different kinds of calls that you can run with. So I think the whole FLF experience will give you resilience, whichever way it goes. But fingers crossed, the FLFs will work for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Georgina. And thank you also to Ruth and Joseph, who've put in the chat function their experiences of their FLF interview. I will now jump into the Q&A session, but what I did just want to point out is that we actually held a similar event in January, and we actually asked Ruth to host a breakout session, which was exploring added value. And she's put together a handout kind of thinking about impact, which we will share after the event, because I think it would just be extremely useful. So now I'm going to invite Holly back, and she's going to go through a couple of questions that we've received. Just to flag again, if we don't get the opportunity to address your question, we will get in touch with you. We will be putting the pre-recorded video on our website, along with any other resources that we have available that will hopefully prove useful.
Okay, thank you. The first question, I guess it's more aimed towards our award holders and also our panelists, I suppose. So if any of you want to jump in with a response, we would greatly appreciate it. So can you give any advice about juggling commitments during the fellowship? For example, how to decide what time to spend on teaching commitments and time devoted to the fellowship? There is a bit of a restriction in the guidance, as you can spend 6 hours on other activities, but I'm sure there are a lot of things you have to juggle when you're doing the project. Ruth or Joseph, when you start, if you have any advice?
I can talk to that for a little bit. I was doing a lot of teaching before I got my UKRI. I was very heavily doing temporary work at a variety of universities as a guest lecturer, visiting lecturer, and then I went and worked in the research support office and got to see things on the other side of the desk, and then I went into my fellowship. I would say, someone actually in the middle of a fellowship, you really want this to be your focus. You really need to have your eyes on what you're doing on your fellowship, and I would be really careful about spreading yourself too thin, because it's so easy to get locked into all the stuff that comes with teaching, the administration and the hours that you spend with your students, particularly in current circumstances where everything's had to change quite rapidly in the style of teaching, the way that we're interacting, the marking mounts up. So I think this is a really rare opportunity. If you're going to stay in academia, you will always have to do teaching. That's never probably ever going to go away. But this is a really rare opportunity to just do research and do it really well. So for me, I would try to avoid skating on thin ice and doing as much as I can pack into that 6 hours as possible. I really would try and reduce as far as you're humanly able to any other commitments, so you really allow your fellowship to breathe and you give it the attention that it needs, because having to just switch, even on my fellowship where I have to switch hats quite a lot, I'm meeting with my team and I have certain specific detailed tasks we have to go through, and then I have to switch and do my external stuff, and I have to switch and I have to do admin for my project, and then I have to switch and actually sit and read academic books on what I'm doing. So even just changing hats within the fellowship is quite a tiring thing to do, because until you're on a fellowship it might not be easy to understand the scale and the scope of what you're now having to pull off. If I was also having to now drag in teaching into all of this and any other kind of major commitments within the university, I really would have to therefore reduce my time and my focus and my headspace for my own fellowship. So that is my own personal opinion, that I think you need to really dedicate, if you're going to commit, fully commit to a UKRI.
Fantastic, thank you very much. And there are some requirements about dedicating your time in the UKRI FLF guidance, so I would suggest you all take a read of that as well. Steve, this one's probably more aimed towards yourself. With regard to the host institution, please can you define what is meant by an open-ended position so that I can be clear about what I'm asking the host institution to pledge their support for?
Yeah, I mean, that's really a position within the university that doesn't have a fixed end date. So, essentially an ongoing contract where there's no, not a temporary contract. It's probably easier to define it by what it's not. So yeah, simply a position that will go on as long as you want it to, depending on the university and their age restrictions.
Fantastic, thank you. And also another one which I could answer, but I will ask you to answer so you can give a more formal response. This one says, I'm 41, I came into academia late after a previous related to my field career. I'm early career, but not young. Does this matter?
I mean, 41 is young, come on. No, it doesn't. We don't consider age when we're considering where you are in your career stage. It's, you're new to academia, you're considered an early career researcher. We don't consider age at all when it comes to this.
We've had some other questions that are somewhat more specific, so we'll either get back to you directly or we will make sure there is guidance in our website post when we give all the information. But I'm just going to hand over to Jess because we are nearing the end. So she's just going to do a short presentation on the early career opportunities within AHRC if the FLF schemes may be not correctly suited for you.
Thank you, Holly. So yeah, I'm conscious that I'm aiming to finish at 3:30, so I'm going to give you a very whistle-stop tour of a couple of funding opportunities that I think will be relevant to early career researchers. Now, this is the bit where you're going to find out that I have dreadful IT skills, and I'm now going to attempt to share my screen, which I should know how to do given we've been doing this for how long? So let's give it a go. Has that worked, Holly? I feel like...
Yeah, you're all sorted.
Wonderful. Okay, so just to go through. So thought it might be helpful before we wrap up to just quickly highlight 3 funding opportunities available to arts and humanities early career researchers via AHRC that I think would be beneficial. Before I begin, I just would strongly recommend all arts and humanities researchers to keep an eye on our website for funding opportunities available, or better yet, to sign up to our newsletter so that you could be notified of any new calls launching. So for those of you that aren't overly familiar with AHRC, we have 4 responsive mode schemes. What I mean by that is that we have four funding opportunities that are open year round. There's no deadline. And there's 3 of which I think would be of particular interest to early career researchers, which I'm going to talk you through now. So the first one is the AHRC Research Development and Engagement Fellowship Scheme. Now, this replaced the Leadership Fellow Scheme earlier this year, following on from a consultation we had with our community. A couple of changes were made, including the name of the scheme to better meet our community's needs, but the aims and the purpose of the scheme are primarily the same. So this scheme is designed to support arts and humanities researchers at all career stages, enabling each fellow to undertake ambitious, innovative research in any area as long as it predominantly falls within AHRC's remit, as well as the opportunity to develop themselves, thus enhancing their careers. Now, there are 2 routes to the scheme to ensure we're able to support all career stages. So the first of which is a standard route, which is to support mid-career and established researchers. And then we have the ECR route. Now, for the ECR route, the funding amount is between 50 and 250,000, and then the duration of up to 24 months. Now, the fellowship scheme not only gives ECRs the opportunity to carry out individual research that moves beyond their doctoral projects, but it also gives early career researchers the time to develop themselves as researchers, to undertake activities that would benefit them in the long term. Now, this could be shadowing individuals, this could be placements, this could be developing public or policy engagement skills, whatever you think would suit you. ROs are required to provide mentoring support throughout the duration of the fellowship. I just wanted to flag that co-investigators are not permitted, but research assistants are for a limited time on the fellowship. We also hold an annual fellowship conference, which gives an opportunity for all of our fellows funded from different schemes. So we invite the FLF award holders along too, to kind of network. And we also host dedicated breakout sessions to address specific skills and training opportunities. I think last time we had, for example, one on social media training. Now, that's the first one. The second scheme that I think might be of interest, which I'm sure the majority of people are familiar with, is the AHRC Research Grant Scheme. Now, similar to the RDEF scheme, which is a terrible acronym, which I need to change, there is a specific ECR route that is an ECR route and a standard route to support mid-career and established researchers. Now, the ECR route has been established to support researchers at the start of their career to gain experience of managing and leading research projects. There's 50,000 to 250,000 available and up to 60 months in duration. This scheme allows researchers to lead a research project, again, in any area, as long as it predominantly falls within AHRC's remit. I just want to flag that this scheme is not intended to support individual scholarship. And by that, I mean projects are permitted to include elements of individual research. However, the projects need to be collaborative in nature, therefore collaborating with and bring benefits to other individuals or other organisations. AHRC actually aim to ensure the success rate for proposals submitted to the ECR route of this scheme is slightly higher than proposals submitted to the research grant standard route. So I just wanted to throw that out there. You can include co-investigators and research assistants. Now, the final responsive mode scheme I wanted to flag, which just seems to be just seems to get lost is the research and networking scheme. I love this scheme. So this scheme is intended to support forums for the discussion and exchange of ideas on a specified thematic area, issue or problem. The intention is to facilitate interactions between researchers and stakeholders through, for example, a series of symposia, workshops, seminars, networking activities or other events. There's 30,000 planned available, an additional 15,000 can be made available to cover costs of international participants or international activities, and there's up to 24 months. Now I'm flagging this as this scheme is the perfect opportunity for ECRs to bring people together and flesh out ideas that can then lead on to tangible research projects. And it's also the opportunity for ECRs to build networks with researchers in the UK and internationally and non-academic audiences. Now, I told you that was going to be a whistle-stop tour. So there's 3 funding opportunities that I thought would be of relevance. I think now is the time to wrap up. I want to say a massive, massive thank you again to our fantastic FLF core panelists, Georgina and Joanna, and to our FLF award holders, Ruth and Joseph, for taking their time out of their busy schedules to kind of present, offer advice, etc. So thank you all so much. I'm overwhelmed by the number of people that have signed up to this event. So I'm very much looking forward to reading all of your FLF applications. The round 6 deadline, as mentioned, I'm not going to say the date off by heart because I've got a feeling I'm going to get this wrong, sometime in January in 2021. And if you've got any questions, please feel free to get in touch with us. I believe you should have all been sent our contact details. Holly's put the FLF central contact details in there as well. So please get in touch with us. And as I said before, we will put the recorded video and any other resources that would be of interest on our website. I just want to flag that the UKRI Central is updating their website over the next week or so. So it means that nothing can be put up on the website for at least until next Wednesday. So I sincerely apologise for this awful timing. But as I said, get in touch with us if you've got any issues before then. Thank you all so much, and I hope you have a lovely evening. Thank you.